Greetings and welcome to this edition of
Positronic Hypersonic.
I'm Barry P. Cook, and I want to talk to you about the penultimate episode of Season 1 of Monarch, Legacy of Monsters. It was called Axis Mundi, and that's the Latin term for the axis of the Earth between the celestial poles. In modern comparative mythology, it's been greatly expanded to mean any mythological concept representing the connection between heaven and earth, or the higher and lower realms. This all according to the ever handy-dandy Wikipedia. Anyway, as the episode starts, it's 1962, and in the wake of Keiko's death, Shaw and Billy are with Hiroshi as they prepare to head off to a mission by Monarch, now being led by Puckett again, which Billy leaves Shaw to explain to Hiroshi for some reason, which he does, before leaving him his pocket knife for safekeeping. Apparently, the mission in question is going to the underworld, and while Billy works the mission above ground, Shaw and a team head down to underspace, which is accomplished by luring a Titan to the area under mission command to stabilize a Monarch-made tunnel down to underspace for the Monarch capsule to follow through to underspace safely within, which causes a crazy tornado/electrical storm-like event, which wrecks some equipment and causes it to seem like the capsule was lost. In 2015, Kentaro awakens in a hospital to learn that Shaw, May, and Kate were lost in the pit under the now-destroyed facility they were in, and that he's being sent home. Meanwhile, Shaw wakes up in a forest in underspace and starts looking for Kate, while May wakes up nearby to hear him calling for Kate just before a pink lightning storm starts striking the ground around them, and they have to run to avoid being zapped. Apparently, this is what occurs when a transition from the above world to underspace is made. It causes a brief crazy pink electrical storm. Anyway, Shaw explains to May that while she fell in first, he and Kate fell in together after her, and they both start calling out to Kate. In 1962, we find that funding's been stripped from Monarch after the disaster, and Bill is determined to keep studying what happened against Puckett's advice to not do so because he could end up getting killed and depriving Hiroshi of the only family member he has left in the process, which of course we know eventually happened. Of course, Shaw made it back topside after he first went to underspace in the capsule disaster, but we learned that unbeknownst to him, and though he hasn't aged, 20 years have passed topside, which he learns from a now adult Hiroshi when he holds a nurse hostage to get the facility to bring him Bill Rand, which they'd been refusing to do up to that point since he got back, which of course was because he was dead as far as they knew, and he passes out at the knowledge. Hiroshi then talks with them about what happened to Shaw's capsule, and we see that upon its arrival in underspace, the crew was attacked by a Titan, which caused another crazy storm event, which sent Shaw right back topside, although to a point 20 years further ahead in time. He tells Hiroshi that they should continue Monarch's mission, but Hiroshi is not at all interested in that because of the horrible results of Monarch's work up to that point, and he returns Shaw's knife to him. In 2015, Kentaro is visiting Hiroshi's office, and when Hiroshi arrives, Kentaro informs him that Kate is gone, which Hiroshi takes badly, as Kentaro blames him for her apparent death. Meanwhile, Kate wakes up in underspace and is approached by a giant hog-like creature that almost kills her before it is hurt and run off by a bow and arrow wielding, still young Keiko, who is apparently not dead and has been living in underspace all this time. And that's where the episode ended. So I thought this episode was fantastic. You know, they did a lot of great groundwork with the writing. They have Shaw give Hiroshi his knife for safekeeping, and then 20 years later when he returns, and it's 1982, which we also know, by the way, because as Shaw is walking through the hospital with the nurse that he's holding hostage, he sees a shuttlecraft launch on TV in a patient room. Hiroshi ends up giving him the knife back when he says, I don't want anything more to do with, you and Monarch. And I thought that was just very, well done writing. It creates a follow through and it's, poignant. I thought that scene where he gives him the knife was great because you can see how torn up Hiroshi is by the fact that everything went to shit in his life when, Monarch started doing its thing. He even tells Shaw, for 300,000 years, we lived on Earth with the Titans and there was no problem until you people came along and, started messing around, which I guess is partly fair, but maybe not entirely because they didn't bring about the first Titan event that I recall. But anyway, he's very bitter and upset, and he walks away from Shaw. And Shaw is sent to the nursing home, as it were, where he's been, sort of a prisoner of Monarchs since 1982 until the kids found him in 2015. And we even see him, starting out there. And then there's a flash forward to where he's his current age, and he's seeing the fight in Tokyo between Godzilla and King Kong, or Godzilla and the military. I can't remember which one. But anyway, he sees the Godzilla attack in Tokyo on the news. We also see, I think, I'm not 100% sure, where Hiroshi met Kentaro's mom. She was the nurse that Shaw held captive briefly, and he brings her flowers afterwards, and they talk. And I think we're supposed to get from that that's where he met Kentaro's mom. So that was cool. But I thought they did a great job, too, with the reveal itself. Because when he first wakes up in the hospital and he's still the young guy, you think, oh, it's a day later, it's a week later, it's a month later. Because nothing about his immediate surroundings scream 20 years later. He is in a weird sort of medical tent inside a facility that doesn't necessarily look 1962, but, if you think about the government and Monarch and all that, it's possible they had like a weird futuristic thing to keep him in. And then as he's first, when he first sees the medical personnel, they're in these weird hazmat suits, but again, it doesn't necessarily scream, 20 years later. So you're not aware right away that it's any particularly long amount of time later. And even when he sees a regular nurse later without a hazmat suit on, it's a Japanese nurse in 1982, but she's wearing very traditional nursing clothing that you would have seen in the 60s or before, because the Japanese are very traditional like that, or Asians tend to be, as far as I understand it, when it comes to these professions, like the military and the police and nursing, at least at the time. They wore sort of clothing that wasn't necessarily up to date with the times. Anyway, it seems very much like it's still 1962 until he's walking the halls holding the nurse hostage, and he passes a TV that he happens to glance at in a patient's room, and you see the shuttle launch, and you realize, oh shit, it's 1982, because that's when the shuttle first launched. And then as he's walking down the hall and he's demanding that they bring him Bill Rand, a man far away down the hall says, "We can't. He's dead." And as he approaches, you see that he's Asian. And I went, holy shit, that's frickin' Hiroshi. And sure enough, it is. And he holds up the knife to prove it. And then Shaw passes out. And I thought that was absolutely brilliant, because it tricks you until the moment you see the space shuttle, and then you see Hiroshi and you realize, oh my God, that's why he isn't super old now, because he jumped time 20 years. And that's a mystery we've been trying to figure out since the beginning of the show. And I think it's great that they laid the groundwork for that by at least one person saying to him, aren't you supposed to be like 90 years old? And, the realization that, wait a minute, he was in 1955 and now it's 2015. How is he not 90? Well, that explains it. Apparently, he jumped time 20 years when he was in underspace for what seemed like a brief moment. The capsule landed. They were trying to figure out what to do. They got hit by an attack, and next thing he knew, he was 20 years in the future. So it seems like he jumped time. And they don't say anything to the effect that he was down there for a long time. So it's not like he spent 20 years down there and didn't age. He would have realized that. So he simply jumped time. But then in the end, we see Keiko. She has presumably been down there since 1962 or whatever, and now it's 2015. So it must also be that when you're down there, you don't age, because she didn't. So I'm sure we're going to get the explanation for that in the season finale next week, which I can't wait to see. But, all of this stuff together, I think, made this episode fantastic. We got the reveal of, why he's not significantly older. We got to see Hiroshi meet a woman who is apparently, or whom I'm thinking is Kentaro's mother. We got a scene between Kentaro and Hiroshi. They finally see each other, and they have words. And we got to see underspace for the first time since Godzilla versus Kong. And we saw a couple of creatures down there. And of course, the reveal that Keiko is still alive, which is fantastic, and which I thought might happen. I said, when they go down there, I bet they're going to find her alive. But I figured she'd be older. She didn't age. That's very strange. But anyway, just a very well done episode, and an episode that set up the finale spectacularly. So I'm definitely looking forward to that finale. And I will be here once it's released to do a recap and review of that episode. For now, I'm going to get out of here. Until I return, I wish you peace and long life.